back to the Real Estate Reserve Podcast. I'm Jason Bound from Hard Money Bankers, co-host Ian Horowitz from Equity Warehouse. Definitely have a great show planned for everybody today. A great guest named Bryce Matheson from Lender Software, Holbrook Capital. Everyone will learn a little bit more about his background here in a second. If this is your first time tuning in, welcome. Promise we'll keep this entertaining. Bryce has a lot of good information and nuggets to give between a lot of different industries inside real estate investing and software to offer. So I'm sure he's going to bring today. And if you're a return viewer, follower, listener, watcher, viewer, thanks again for all your support. We couldn't do it without you. We try to bring real estate investors that are doing real deals out there. You know, the market's changing, the economy's changing. So it's great to know what other real estate investors are doing and kind of, what they're up to these days.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely excited for this because, as you said, this is a real person doing real things. And guys, the best compliment we can give them is by sharing the show. We don't care about the likes and subscribes. We care about being able to push their information out there and helping them out. Now, we are small potatoes because our guest today, and we'll get into it here in a minute, has had one of the biggest influencers in the whole United States, maybe world right now, share some of his information. So it'd be cool to co-sign some of that. But the other thing I'm kind of nervous about is we have another energy drink connoisseur coming on the show. And I think we need to have a little bit of debate about that too at some point during the show. So we're going to talk about everything today. We're going to go social. We're going to go energy drinks. We're going to go real estate, founder story. We're going to do it all. So enough about us, and let's bring in Bryce.
Bryce, what's up, buddy? How are you?
Hey guys, thanks for having me. This is exciting. We're hitting all the points here, and I'm here for it. So let's do it.
All your favorite talking points.
Yep, exactly.
Give everybody a quick background. Where you currently live, what you currently spend, maybe your the majority of your time day to day on.
Sure. So Bryce Matheson recently relocated to Arizona, lived in Idaho for about the last 15 years. Finally got tired of the weather and we've kind of relocated here now, but still doing a lot of business based out of Idaho. A large chunk of my day, probably the largest chunk of my day is working on building out a software tool called Lender, which is a platform for private lenders. And I'm sure we can dive into that a little bit in the future. But still very active in real estate, particularly, private lending. That's kind of our main bread and butter as well. And dabble a little bit in social media, try to use that as kind of a lead gen source. And I don't know. I think the thing that I'm trying to focus on now is just mainly that is focus. I think as entrepreneurs, myself especially, we're like, addicted to ooh shiny, and it's fun to kind of dabble in new things. But my focus as of late is like, okay, I gotta quit looking at all these other things and just focus on, make the main thing the main thing. So I think that's kind of where I'm at now.
Yeah. But before we go down the road of real estate strategies and things like that, and how you got into real estate, I know you kind of have a background of building and exiting some software companies. How did you get into software to begin with?
Sure. So I've been an IT computer nerd. I mean, ever since I was like 6 years old. I started tinkering with computers. I would break computers just to see if I could fix them. So I was always like kind of intrigued by that ever since a young age. And then when I was around 15, I started learning how to code, build websites. So I would do that for family friends. Like the first website I remember building was for a family friend who had a beauty and hair salon, and they just needed a website. So I started with that. And then just kind of moved into that. That was my professional career. I worked in the government space for Department of Energy with Department of Homeland Security for around 10 years as well, as an IT infrastructure and cybersecurity guy back there. So professionally I did that, but on the side, I was always doing real estate. And so real estate and the software space kind of merged together. For example, when I first started out, as most people do, we just started buying one or two rental properties. And I started to notice a kind of a lack or a niche in the industry that there was really not a lot of good software out there for real estate investors as far as like keeping track of expenses, right? Like most people would naturally say, oh, just use QuickBooks. QuickBooks is great, but it actually wasn't that great for real estate, mainly because I was trying to figure out, okay, I can see the overall like income and expenses for my business, but I wanted to see how the individual units in my portfolio were doing. Are they profitable or not? You can see, great, I'm making $5,000 a month, but do I have some winners or do I have some losers? And there are some ways to do that in QuickBooks that it kind of gets complicated, and you have to do these things called classes, and you have to like, it's like a $60 a month plan. And I'm like, look, I shouldn't have to spend $800 a year just to see if my deals are profitable or not. So I started to kind of merge my interest with owning rental properties and my love for tech. And I built my first software platform. It was called Rentastic, which we've since exited now. But it was basically QuickBooks for mom and pop landlords. And you could put in your properties, you put in all your bank accounts and expenses, and would say, hey, this property is making you $300 per month net, and this one's actually losing you $200 a month net. So that was kind of our first like foray into real estate and software, and then it's kind of transitioned into other opportunities and ventures from there.
I resonate with everything you just said about QuickBooks and the BS that goes on with them to try to get that to go. And it's actually interesting that, that's the background and that's the route that you took to do that. I'm guessing you have a pretty analytical mind, and that's how you end up, becoming a lender. And I know we're kind of fast forwarding here, but like, it's just interesting to hear your thought process on bookkeeping and rental properties and trying to figure that out. When you did figure that out, how quick did people pick up to that to be like, yo, dude, thank God you figured this out?
Yeah, it was pretty immediate. I mean, it's funny because you would think that there would be there'd already be a solution out there for it. Like if everybody's having this kind of a problem, why is this not already being addressed? But it just didn't really seem like it was something that people were tackling, because everyone just assumed that, QuickBooks is the big dog in the space. So why try to interrupt that? But as soon as I did that, people were like, oh, this is awesome. Literally all you do is add your properties, you connect your bank account, it imports your transactions, and then you go, okay, this was for 123 Main Street, this was for 246 Main Street, and then just does all the math and calculations for you. And so it's very simple, not a super difficult problem to solve. But it did seem to take off. People adopted it pretty quickly. And, I wouldn't say it was like this massive operation or huge success or anything like that. But, we had over, I think, 2,000 users on the platform, within the first 18 months or so. So it was pretty successful.
Is it safe to say that you created you start an investing strategy, and you realize what tech is not up to par or would make your life easier, and then you create a software based on you first, and then obviously
absolutely. And that's, I mean, that trend has continued too, which we can talk about, is like I venture into a real estate space and I say, wow, this software is not cutting it. I'm not pleased with the existing offerings. And so I'm like, you know what, I'll just make it myself.
So let me ask you this about software, right? Because like if I build out an Excel sheet, that's my thought process, that's my workflow, that's my everything. And if I showed it to you and Jason, you'd be like, all right, I see the end number, but how did you arrive there? Is that the same thing? Like, do you think that the solutions are there and your brain's not allowing you to utilize the solutions because it's not your thought process? Or does the UI and the tech actually not blow, that's not the right way to say it. It just doesn't work the way it should for the majority of the industry, right?
It's a good question. The hardest part is, like you would think, okay, cap rates and LTV and just like some of these basic metrics that should be fairly standard that everyone like relies on, you come to find out it's actually not the case. And people calculate things differently, and the processes are slightly different. And so you think that like, oh, I'll just create this one size fits all. And it turns out, no, it's not one size fits all. And it's just for you. And we want to do it different this way. And so catering to everyone and anyone is actually a pretty significant challenge.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, we dealt with that in the storage space, the big tech conglomerates out there were actually really antiquated. To the fact that like when someone would check out, you can't even tag the customer because you had to go to their native page. And they're like, oh, well, this isn't a problem. It's like, but yeah, it is a problem because we're spending dollars on marketing. I want to watch the marketing flow through my whole system, and another companies come in and, oh, they're going to put them out of business, but they're going to put a massive dent into them because we're an online business, so That's interesting to see. Let's go backwards a little bit. You know, you buy a rental property or a few, and then you build the tech. When you start building the tech, does that take away from your real estate investing, or are you doing both, seesawing all the way through this up the ladder?
Yeah, it's definitely a little bit of both. I would say we were like 50-50 on both sides. Like we were still actively building our rental portfolio, but also improving the software. And something really interesting happened when we decided to exit that first software platform. And I don't know if this is the direction that we want to take the podcast, but what was really interesting was the way, if you're not familiar, the way that software works is when you go to sell a software company, it's based on EBITDA, right, and revenue multiples. And so typically speaking, when you have like a brick and mortar business, you know, a laundromat or a gym or something like that, you know, you can maybe get 1 to 2x annual revenue. If you have a marketing agency and you're running, you know, Facebook and Google ads for you know, a digital entity or whatever, you know, you can typically sell that for 3 to 4x. Software companies, depending on profitability, will sell for anywhere from 5 to 12x your annual revenue. So the multiples are massive. So what happened was when I sold this company, and I'm under NDA still, so I can't really talk about like the exit, but it was around mid 6 figures, right? Considering the amount of time and effort that I put into this and exiting the software platform for mid 6 figures, I kind of had this like epiphany moment, just like, whoa, this was awesome. You know, it was generating $70,000 to $100,000 annually, which, you know, not a huge business, but when you go and you sell it and you get 5, 6, 7, 8x what it was doing, that was like, whoa, maybe this is more lucrative than I was originally thinking of. Because on the flip side, I was getting these rentals, and yeah, you know, you've got principal pay down and it's slowly increasing and all these things. It was great. But at the end of the day, $250 to $500 net per month from a duplex doesn't really materially change your life. You know, it's still nice. It covers your expenses. But when you get a 6-figure paycheck, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this is awesome. So that was kind of a big like mindset shift for me.
Yeah, Ian and I talk about that, you know, a good amount of times. And obviously, you know, the purpose of that rental property, yes, short term is to replace some cash flow. But yeah, I mean, it's in the long play where it's really valuable enough that it's actually going to move the needle. And I think a lot of folks don't realize that, you know, if you look at folks that might be perceived more successful than you, and I'm not saying that they are more successful than you, but they typically have some sort of like early exit with some big equity event where they have that capital backing to start with, right? Because a lot of people can make a lot of cash flow. They flip properties, they wholesale properties, they lend money out, and they, you know, other people's money, and they do like that. And it's just, you know, constant cash flow. And that's a great thing. You know, it's beautiful to get to that point. Similar to like what you said, you know, with your software company. But until you can kind of get that big hit, it's kind of hard to get over that first hurdle quickly. Right.
Yep.
Right. Because then it's like, okay, cool. I just made 8 years worth of income today. Right. If your company was doing it. And then I don't know if you were talking about gross numbers or net numbers, but regardless, you know, it's if you have that, you know, liquidity event, and in essence, it's like, hey, I'm going to fast forward in time, even though I'm going to stay here today, I'm going to fast forward in net worth by 8. Like that's a powerful thing. That's
Absolutely.
a powerful thing. And, you know, I think there's a lot of folks that don't kind of realize that, especially, you know, some of these buy and hold real estate investors. And Ian and I talk about this a lot with like some of the, you know, residential into commercial stuff, right? So you got your residential stuff. It's like, listen, there's only so much this townhouse is going to be worth, right? Like you've already done the value add. You've already put in the heavy lifting. Like, could it double in value again? Maybe. Could it triple in value again? Maybe. But like, it's going to take a long period of time before it gets to that. And, you know, Ian had some big multifamily projects and some commercial assets. And it's like, listen, like do the math on this thing. There's millions of dollars in equity on some of these things, but it doesn't spit out to millions of dollars in actual value. It's like these things are spitting out like a few $1,000. Like do the rate of return. They're not all that great. Imagine if, and I know that like, you know, a lot of buy and hold investors want to stick around for the long game. That's just kind of what their mind tells them to do. But it's like, imagine if you had $1 million in liquidity instead of $1 million, you know, in your bank account instead of $1 million in equity that is not liquid. What can you do with that? You can buy so many more properties. You can turn into this, turn into that. So
exactly.
I'm also guessing that, as you got out of the rental game, you're like, I don't really need the software that much anyways. I'm not as passionate about it. I want to build software of what I'm passionate about. I'm just guessing, because that's something that I think I would do if I was in your situation.
Yeah, well, it's less about the software, which obviously we do love. Like I said, I've always had a love for tech. But originally, when we started investing in 2016, and I remember I had the Excel spreadsheets, I had all the numbers, and I was like, okay, if we make $250 per month net per door, everybody does the calculations, right? And this is like your beautiful number. You're like, okay, I need to replace, my dream number at the time was $10,000 per month net. I was like, I could quit my job. It's not it's not FU money or like Lambo yacht money, but it's like, I can quit my job. Right. And I remember, okay, $10,000 a month net. Great. And then what happened was we kind of put our heads down, we buckled down, we just kept buying properties and flipping properties and moving that money into more down payments and getting more rentals. And one day I kind of took my head up, I lifted my head up, and we were at $12,000 per month net. And instead of I imagined it feeling like, you just summited Mount Everest and you're like, wow, this is really euphoric and great. But in the end, I was kind of like, ugh. I had this feeling of I was almost sick to my stomach. Not that I wasn't grateful or the money wasn't great, but it was almost what it represented. It's okay, now I have 45 units, which means I have 45 tenants and 45 toilets and all these roofs and water heaters and HVAC systems. And it was it weighed on me. And people are like, oh, just get a property manager and stuff. It's yes, but there's still things that you have to worry about. Twice a year you get tax statements in the mail from the county, and it's like a book. It's like a stack this big. It's hey, this is what you owe in property taxes. It was still stuff that I had to worry about, even if you have a property manager. And so ultimately it came down to the money's great, but what it really represented was not necessarily where my heart was any longer. And so that's when we kind of started to transition out of things.
Yeah. And I think too many real estate investors get attached and don't want to make that change, right? You're talking about it in the way of door count. It's also in the way of money, right? You went from $0 to $1 million or whatever. Every house is worth $100,000. So you went from $0 to $5 million of assets, but to go from $5 million assets to $10 million assets is going to take a totally new system process. And nobody wants to do the hard work to get to that next level. Some do, right? That's why they climb the ladder and they make a lot of money over the same time horizon. And I know we kind of went through the same thing, but we did it more from the standpoint of all right, well, they're operating and we have the team, let's just put them in our collection pot. But now we're starting to dispose of them. And, you're getting 10 years of cash flow in one shot. You're getting on some of these rental properties, the values of, single family rentals, they've increased so much. Like you said, $3,600 a year. If everything goes right, and we're netting 50, 60 grand, the return on trapped equity, I think, is a calculation that people really need to try to figure out a way to calculate in their book of business. I don't know it needs to be on a software, but you need to be cognizant of it. We just did it on a multifamily property. We were netting, each partner was netting 30 grand a year, $2,500 a month without trying, and we each made 300 grand off that deal. And it was boom, we're done. Keep it moving. 10 years of cash flow. And the one partner was well, then what? I said, well, now you take that same 300 grand, you try to get the same 20% rate of return. You get to the next asset and let's go. Oh, I never thought about it like that. Because you started living off the $2,500 a month. It was just in his budget, and it became a minimalist mindset rather than an abundant mindset.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. And then it kind of naturally so we transitioned slowly out of the rentals because we kind of did that same math. You're okay, so if we flip this house and we make $40,000-$50,000 net, if you run the numbers, that's going to take 8 to 12 years to make the same amount of money that we just made on that flip, that we would, from cash flow. And that's assuming, like you said, everything goes great, that we don't have to re-renovate the place and do paint and carpet and tile and new Formica and all this kind of stuff because tenants trash it. It's just, there are better ways to make more money faster. And I think when you're just starting out, you don't know what you don't know and you're ignorant, and that's fine. You learn and you just kind of do it. But it sounds like the three of us have all gone through that, and we've realized there are better, faster, easier ways to make money, and hence that kind of natural progression and that transition into other ventures.
Sure. And you start in the asset class that you can wrap your brain around, that you have the money for, you have the resources for. I mean, Ian was buying $25,000 properties. We were buying inexpensive stuff. Like that's just what you're comfortable with. Like that's, you can't see yourself when you're starting out, like what you said, and your number was very similar to my number. It's like, hey, I just want to, make about $100,000 a year.
Exactly.
To get out of, other stuff that I didn't like doing, and that would work. Like you don't have your eyes on like $10 million or some really big picture because you can't wrap your brain around it.
Right.
You can't. Right. And I agree with, like, we're all on the exact same page. And I was thinking about this story that a guy named Joe, who's in Bryce and mine Hard Money Mastermind group, he about flipping houses, because he's been in the game for a long time and he's flipped a ton of properties in Ohio and he owns properties. And I had a real interesting conversation with him. And it's not the first time that a conversation like this came up, but in essence, it was like, I'm really good at flipping houses. I have a very good system in place. I have a staff that does everything. And it's hard for me to want to take some of my cash away from that business to lend it out, where I'm learning lending, and he's got, millions of dollars on the streets and lending, but it's not a humongous operation. And it's newer to him. He's not getting the returns that he's getting in the flipping business. And I don't disagree with him on that. I don't think a lot of people are in his position. I think a lot of people that were in that position, they get into lending because they're like, it's so much easier. And yes, I'm going to make a smaller, dollar sign return on the deals, but it's almost passive after you have the thing up and running. And it's certainly safer and more secure. But it was a good conversation and I respected it. And I was like, you know what, you might be right. Like, he enjoyed doing it. And again, if you don't enjoy doing something, you're never going to be able to do it anyways. And I used to tell some of these big flippers locally when they wanted to pick my brain about lending. And I'm like, listen, I don't know if lending is going to be sexy enough for you. It's not all that sexy in general. If you enjoy going to properties, looking at properties, putting finished touches on properties, doing all these things, that doesn't do anything for me personally. But for some people it did. Yeah. So when did you have the shift to go from like what was the aha moment where you were like, you know what, I don't know if I want to buy rentals or flips anymore. I kind of want to go in the lending side. Like, How did that happen?
Yep. So good question. This was right around COVID timeframe. And we had a project that basically just about everything that could have gone wrong did go wrong. I mean, the numbers were killer, but just, through, as like flip projects just always don't go according to plan. We had a painter who stole $10,000 from us. COVID hit, the market kind of just came to a screeching halt. We had supply shortages and contractor issues and anyway, long story short, we ended up taking about 14 months to flip this house, which, as you know, is like way longer than it should ever take to flip a house. In the end, we netted around, we basically broke even. We net around $1,200, I think, when it was all said and done. And I remember looking at the HUD statement at closing, and our hard money lender at the time, he made $25,000 on that project. And I can guarantee you, he had no idea what was going on. He didn't have the sleepless nights that we did. I remember literally driving around in a 12-hour radius, just trying to find baseboard because I couldn't get baseboard anywhere to finish up this project. And that was the last thing that we were waiting for. It's like nobody anywhere around us had baseboard. So I loaded up a flatbed trailer in my truck and I was driving 12 hours. I kid you not, to get baseboard to finish this project. And so all of that kind of stuff to make $1,200, I was like, this is absolutely insane. And this guy made $25,000 and he literally did nothing but send a wire and then just kind of sat on his hands. So that was the kind of the light bulb moment and the catalyst that I was like, oh, okay, maybe I should look more into this. And that's when the transition slowly started to happen.
Then you started drinking Jason's Kool-Aid, and we could just end the podcast here. But no, I get that because I think that's how I first got into real estate. My background was I was a fireman for the city of Baltimore, and I remember saying, how do I make money every second of the day while I'm here stuck at work overnight working? And it's interesting that your same aha moment was like, well, this lender made all the money this whole damn time while I'm stressing out. And it's interesting. And I bet you if you went back and looked at it earlier in your investing career, I bet you there was a couple other forks that you probably pressed through to be like, I'll keep doing hard assets versus lending. Looking back on it, do you think that happened early in your career, or was that really that was the end all be all this COVID situation?
I don't know that was necessarily the case. It was because I don't think like we mentioned, I don't think I was in a place mentally or even just like cognizant of the fact that like I could even be a lender. It was never on my radar because as you know now, like you don't really have to have millions and millions of dollars to be a lender, and like you raise private capital and things like that. But like it was just not even possible. I was having a hard time like even funding these flips in the first place. Like my cash flow was not great. There was no concept of that in my mind whatsoever.
And was this like in sync with that catalyst of the sale of the tech company?
The software tool. It was very very close. It was shortly after, and they were kind of like correlated. And I was like, whoa! Imagine if I have this big software exit and then I take those funds and move it into lending. How much more can I make, and how much more passive would it be? And now I don't even have to flip houses, whatsoever.
Right, without trying too hard, you can make 50 to 100 grand on 500 grand, right? And you got like, oh shit, and you didn't have that money before. And I think that's we talked about this before, the maturity of getting that cash into your bank account, being able to know what to do with, what to do with it early in your real estate investing career. Some people just don't know. I mean, like I'll be honest, I made a 6-figure check and I probably spent it on every dumb thing I could early within like 2 years of being in real estate. But looking back on it, it's like, damn, that 100 grand could have turned into $1 million of assets. I really fucked up. Like, god damn it, but you can't go backwards. You can only go forwards.
Right.
What go ahead, Jay.
So when did you realize inside your lending operation that the current software tools weren't adequate?
Pretty early on. So this is what happened. I didn't even honestly go out and look at like the current offerings because being in the tech space, like it's my natural inclination to like I can just like make something myself. So for example, the way that this started was and I know we kind of like don't. I know what I was doing was wrong, and don't poo-poo on me, Jason. Okay, but I got my doc set from my attorney, and every time I had a new loan, I would just take my doc set and I would put it in Word and I would copy and paste. And what I would do is I would take an old document set, I would put in the new borrower's LLC name and all that kind of stuff. I would send it to title, and then I would forget to like change the LLC name here and the LLC name here. And so title would kick it back and they'd be like, well, this doesn't match up. This doesn't look right. And I was like, oh man. And so I'd go back in and it took me like 45 minutes to an hour to do this. It took forever. And B, it's like a really bad look. It's unprofessional when your lender is messing things up on the paperwork and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, there's got to be a better way. So what I did was I built just like, if you're familiar with like mail merges in Word or whatever, I built a simple like mail merge thing. So I put in I've got all the borrowers like loan application. I click a button and it just goes and it puts all the values in right where it's supposed to go. I send it to title and they're like, cool, looks great. And so what ended up happening was I had another friend who was actually a lender, and he was like, oh, that's really awesome. Can I use this? And so he said, so I said, sure. Yeah. So I sent it over to him. He's like, oh, this is amazing. But it'd be really great if it could do this, this, and this. And so I was like, oh, well, it can't do that now, but I can make it do that. And so I kind of, tweaked it and reiterated it. And then you can see kind of how that balloons into this full-fledged software suite to, what we have today now with Lender. And there was also a time where I did start to branch out and look at the existing offerings out there for lending. The big names are TMO and Mortgage Automator and stuff like that. They were quite cost prohibitive. B, they were ugly and clunky. And I'm kind of a big proponent of like, if I'm going to use a software tool, it has to be kind of sexy and have a nice user interface, or I'm just flat out not going to use it. And I was like, you know what? I've already got this half-baked tool. I'm just going to make this the best, baddest thing on the market. And that's kind of led to where we are now.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm envious of that. I think Ian's envious of that. I've definitely spent, 6 figures on building software for different businesses in real estate that we've done. And without having that software background, it was
it's really tough.
It's very, very challenging. And, different folks that do stuff code things differently. And then it's like, hey, I had this master plan that didn't work, where in essence I was like, hey, I'm going to get my local guy who I know who's very, very talented to kind of put something together. Then I'm going to outsource for much cheaper talent this other stuff. I'm going to manage the whole thing. I don't know any of this crap. And then I'm going to send it to this guy and then have him button it all up. And clearly that didn't work. So, I mean, I think, a lot of real estate investors they Band-Aid some of their stuff. Like if I ask you, Ian, how many software packages do you pay for? It's a ton, myself included. But like as kind of the active driver of the business, I think there's a few different types of business owners. I think some business owners that are just pure visionaries. It's just kind of like, hey, somebody else figure it out. Like, I don't care what we use, just kind of figure it out. I'm definitely more owner operator oriented. Ian, I think, is more owner operated oriented. I mean, I think we're in businesses that like the product, it's an investment vehicle and the product is the investment. So it's not like, hey, I'm selling just straight education or a book or a widget where it's like, it doesn't really matter how it gets delivered or any of this other stuff. Like if as a lender or as, a property owner, let's be honest, if you like fuck up on underwriting or your attention to detail isn't good or isn't perfect, like, hey, I might have a bad loan that I wrote and I can't even foreclose on it because, I missed something. So, and obviously I don't want to state that to scare people. We obviously have, QC in place and things that we do, but like, that's a big part of it. So anyways, going back to like being the owner user, it's like, I don't have, a CTO or somebody that can just like put together this software package for me. Like I got to develop it and, Google, the Google Suite obviously is helped with some of those things. And I mean, I've tried everything for so many different stuff. And to this day, we still Band-Aid things together of what works and, what work. And like, think about it. Like, think about our, other lenders that we know. A lot of people use your software. A lot of people use other people's software. Sometimes they're stuck with it because they used it early on and they don't want to get rid of it. That's the benefit of sticky software. But it's also how people's brains work. There's a woman in our group and she used, a big, well-known brand. And like, I'm sure that, and I don't currently use that company, so I'm not familiar with how it looks, but like, and it had everything to offer as another smaller company that she ended up going with because her brain didn't adapt to the way that it was set up, right? Like her mind was like, I can't freaking figure out. It's not, she's like, it doesn't flow in the way it works. So that's kind of why I think we all Band-Aid some of this stuff together because we want to keep it easy for inside of our business. I mean, I use literally, Google Sheets for a lot of different things. Not loan servicing and stuff like that, but for like smaller tasks things, instead of like CRMs, for pipeline things, because it's just simple. And that's what people, so it's whatever kind of is easy for people.
How much do you think AI is going to put to bed? Jason mentioned it just here again at the end of the conversation was, I got all these damn things going on. I got Google Sheets. I got this. I got that. This word AI, I figure you're probably the best person to ask because you're the most tech person we've had on in a long time. The word AI, number one, and then number two, how much of quote unquote AI is going to put a lot of this ancillary crap to bed, right?
Yes. So I have a lot of thoughts on AI, and I use and leverage AI every single day. I personally believe that people underestimate how big of an invention AI truly is. I really do. I mean, I compare it to like discovering fire. Like this is truly like monumental, groundbreaking, and people just do not understand like how this changes the game for everything. That being said, I do think we are still a long ways out from AI truly taking over and being like the, like where you say, build this thing and it builds it. For example, I don't know if you're familiar with like, there's a tool called Replit. Replit, you can go out and you can say, build a website that does this. It's really cool. It's awesome. It is still so far away from being able to build from scratch, a full-on software suite that does X, Y, Z, servicing, start to finish, loan intake, calculations, math, all that kind of stuff. Like it can basically build landing pages from start to finish, and it does a pretty good job of it. The super fine-tuned, in-depth software tools, I think, are going to be isolated and insulated for quite some time, just because they're so specific and so technically complicated that it's very difficult to have something like AI replace it. that being said, we leverage AI in a lot of different ways. And like, for example, this is one of my favorite ways. Like in private lending, one of the biggest pain in the ass is keeping track of insurance and expiration. It's just stupid. Like you get all these different loans. You have to keep track of like, okay, this is coming due. I need to follow up with the borrower and get a policy. And if they don't, then you have to do forced place insurance. It's just something that you have to keep track of, but you really don't want to. So what we do in our system, for example, is we have a document uploader. So people go in, they upload their purchase agreement and comps and operating agreement and articles of organization and proof of insurance and stuff like that. Then what we do is we have AI just scan these documents for us. And on the proof of insurance, for example, it can go through and read that and say, okay, this expires June 22nd of 2025. We store that date in the database, and then you don't even have to think about it. So it's not like I have to go check this. I have to go worry about this. I have to go follow up on this. What it does is like, okay, it knows it's in there. And then 30 days before it expires, it sends an email to you and the borrower and says, hey, I need a new proof of insurance. The borrower uploads a new proof of insurance and it's done. So there's lots of stuff like that where AI is leveraged to enhance the operation, but it doesn't necessarily completely transform or take over 100%.
Yeah, that makes sense. It helps with some of the low-level tasks that you might pay someone to do. Side by side with that, this word AI, I know we're kind of going down a different rabbit hole, but I really got to know because I hear it everywhere. Is it really AI, or is it actually what computers have been able to do for a long period of time, right? Like, is it truly artificial intelligence, or is this like maximizing the power of a computer being able to do what it's supposed to do, right? You get the question?
Yeah. I think it comes from a fundamental understanding of the way that AI and machine learning works. So, for example, the analogy that I give, I heard this story once. There was I believe was in World War II. There were spotters for enemy planes, and they would have it was a dedicated post. You would have someone stand there and spot and say, this is an enemy plane or this is our plane. And so what they would do is there was no way necessarily to, there wasn't like necessarily any writing on the outside of a plane or any like markings or painting or something that was necessarily on the outside of a plane. It was just, you look at enough planes and you could tell this was our plane or this is an enemy plane. And there was no other way to explain it to somebody other than just putting in the reps. So you would have a new spotter, they would come sit next to you and you would say, okay, this is an enemy plane. This is our plane. I can't tell you why, but that is an enemy plane. This is our plane. And then you get enough reps in, and after 40, 50, 60, 100 planes, you could say, okay, this is our plane. This is an enemy plane. And the same thing happens with AI. You show them a picture of a bird and you say, I can't tell you exactly why. You don't have to describe the characteristics, like it has a beak and it has wings and it has feathers and it has all these things. You don't necessarily describe the different characteristics of the image. You just say, this is a bird. And then you show another image and you say, this is a bird. And you say, this is a pelican. And then you show another image and you say, this is a bird and this is a penguin. And like after enough reps, the machine learning can like artificially just know what is being shown to it and say, this is a bird, this is a parakeet, this is a penguin, this is a flamingo. And that's the same way that AI works. So when you talk about these LLM, these large language models, what you're doing is you're just training it on millions of different data points. Like it's just mind-boggling the amount of data and information that you have to train. But you give it enough reps, and pretty soon it starts connecting these different like sentences and words and says, what is the mass? And then it'll start to fill in like the ending of the sentence. And you'll say, what is the mass of the sun? What is the mass of a unit of energy? What is the mass of whatever? And it can artificially just detect what the next sentence is. It is kind of like the human synapses in the brain and just how it like connects all these different data points. So that's kind of a super like high level overview of the way that AI works, but it's really fascinating. So long story long, yes, it really is artificial intelligence, and obviously it's powered by computers behind the scenes, but it truly is artificial the way that all these neural pathways and different like kind of it all works and pieces together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I had to nerd out because it's like sometimes I hear people say AI and it's like, well, is it really AI? Or is it what the computer's always been able to do and you're just selling me bullshit, right? Like, and I think that's really the ultimate question. So that's real interesting. So
one more question for you, Bryce, that I think is a very interesting topic. So you're obviously very creative. If anyone watching or listening hasn't checked out his Instagram page or some of his social platforms, it's at brycematheson.com. We'll put it in the show notes as well. But you've put together some really good Instagram reels and stories that I personally like to follow. I think you like to follow as well. And you've had some good run rates on some of them. How do you creatively kind of come up with some of those topics? I think a lot of not just real estate investors, but business owners in general are looking for ways to increase their channel and increase kind of their viewership and things like that. And I think you do a good job. And I mean, it seems like most of them are tailored to trying to raise capital or to find deals, right? So they might not be related to that particular topic. It kind of goes back to that. Do you kind of have kind of just an ongoing list of like, or hey, I watched this video and I like it. I want to replicate it. Is that kind of the game plan?
Yeah, absolutely. So like, I mean, I don't know anybody who doesn't, but they you lay in bed and you just kind of scroll, right? And as you scroll, I just like, if there's something that piques my interest, not necessarily that you just like copy it verbatim, but if something piques your interest, you're like, oh, I could remake that. I just save the reel. There's an option to save in Instagram. You just save it. And then if I'm ever running out of ideas or, I need something to post, then I just scroll through there, get an idea, get some inspiration, then you repost it. I have a goal of just posting one reel per day, and that's it. And I'm not perfect, and sometimes I miss, and that's okay. But some hit big, and others don't. You can see that one right there. The biggest one was 7.7 million. And the funny thing is, I never thought that would go viral. It just ended up doing it, and it took me all of 30 seconds to film, and it takes off.
You use your iPhone camera for that?
This one I did. I do have a couple that are like, using my nice camera to film a little bit higher quality, but majority I would say is just my iPhone.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's
good. I was going to ask, how do you come up with the copy, right? Like this 7.7, it's a real simple video. You're literally just sitting there working at the computer. Sometimes when I get stressed at work, I'll stop and remind myself who I'm doing all this for, right? And maybe this was the IRS one, or it turned into the IRS one.
Yep.
How did you even come up with that copy? Was that a copy of a copy? Like, did you replicate something, or was this like original content for you?
No, I saw. So it was mostly original content. There was a video that I saw of a girl, and she did something similar in the sense that like, man, I put in all this hard work, but like, I just have to remember who I'm doing it for. And she had a view of all of her like empty like Botox bottles, so she's like working really hard so she can maintain her like skin regimen and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, that's kind of clever. I can spin that in some financial twist. And so pretty much all of my videos, except for like the ones that I do for energy drinks, and I can touch on that later, is something to do with finances, because you're right. The goal is to raise capital and lend it out. And so I have found that if I post lending specific content, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. Like, it's such a niche thing. Like, it doesn't matter. And so my goal is to be an influencer or a thought leader in the space regarding finances and money, just because I'm an entrepreneur. I love money and finances. I'm passionate on growing wealth. And so I feel like that's a closely enough related niche that I can kind of spin it towards people who are, then interested in growing their wealth, and then hence, go down the lending rabbit hole.
Yeah, and I think this screenshot does a good job right here. We're on his page down a little bit, but you got obviously a real estate piece of content, something about traveling, something about golf, something about buying a house, how to be happy, finishing a project, another piece of real estate content, and then your son loading in energy drinks. I mean, that's a pretty good snapshot to show you the almost mind confusion that goes on your page. And I don't know if that's like thought out, but I'm intrigued by it, because it's like, oh man, this guy's putting out fun content, like really sharing his life story to us. And I think that's cool. And I think, I know the more we talk to, with our energy drink that we've launched, talking to other people throughout the industry, we all know this, it's the most organic, granular content that you can create that's real to people is what resonates. And the fact that you have the ability to connect with people on many different levels, like I said, this screenshot does a good job of that.
Yeah, it is. It probably does feel like kind of sporadic and not super cohesive, but I promise there is, like some thought strategy behind it. But one thing that I do tell people is like, have obviously kind of your main theme, and you don't want to stray. Like you can't do cooking and fitness and real estate and money and sewing, and it's too random, right? But I tell people have your main thing, which for me is money and finance, and then also have your weird one thing. And for me, that's energy drinks. And I know they're totally random, but I cannot tell you how many times, probably on a daily basis, I get anywhere from 15 to 20 DMs of people sending me random videos regarding energy drinks. Oh, have you tried this one? Or this one is funny. Or there's a meme page called Caffeine Destroyer, and probably every day I get a meme from Caffeine Destroyer from one of the followers, And so I feel like it's just part of building a brand. For example, you think of Joe Rogan. He is into MMA and aliens and fitness and health. It's just this weird random shit, right? But it works because it's Joe Rogan. So I'm the white monster and money guy, and I'm okay with that because for some reason it works and it's built a brand, and here we are,
Well, we're going to have to stop that whole white monster conversation and really get into the energy drink and how to make you converted. So we're going to work on that. But normally we ask our guests as we close out, because we're going over our normal time here. It's been a really good conversation. Normally I ask people about books and podcasts, so I'll leave that one out there if you want to answer it. But what I really want to know is, what is your favorite energy drink? Because you have not tried ours yet. I even said to Jay on Monday, I said, dude, I should just overnight him one so we could do a live taste testing. I really screwed the pooch on that one. But with that being said, what's your favorite energy drink to go to and why? And if you want to give us a book and podcast, we would appreciate that. But if not, I'm good to talk about energy drinks.
Sure. Right now, and it's front and center on my Instagram page. It's a white monster. That is tough to beat. That is the pinnacle for me. I'll have people send me oh, you should try the Swedish Fish ghost flavor, or the Welch's grape, or what, and so I will, I almost need to set up a separate page for it, to of me going to the gas station and grabbing the energy drink of the day. But
there you go. The energy drink. You heard that, right?
Yeah. TheEnergydrink.com selfish plug.
Yeah, there you go.
But no, white monster, and I'll review other ones, and I still have yet to find one that tops it, but we'll see if yours can do it.
No, nobody knows what's in it. We literally were talking about this is how do you replicate it, but nobody knows what's in the white monster, and that's the allure, and it's the OG in the space, right? It's
what does it taste like?
It's
white monster. It's hard to describe.
Glorious. It's unique. It's like waking up and you walk out your tent and there's a beautiful white vista out your tent window. It's crisp and it's refreshing and it just gives you goosebumps, and it's just the most glorious thing you've ever tasted. Wow. It's the nectar of the gods.
I think we need to bring Bryce back on, not only for the deal that changed his life, but we need to bring him back on for a live taste testing of the energy drink and find out his thought process on the whole thing.
He seems to be an expert.
Yeah, I love it. Bryce, where's the best place? Do you want to answer the book or podcast one?
Sure. So book right now, my favorite book to this day, it's called Buy Back Your Time. It's by Dan Martell. Don't know if you've read it. That was quite transformational to me. And it the TLDR super quick is he's got something he calls the replacement ladder, which basically just talks about basically audit your time, find things that you either despise or okay with, or give you energy and excitement, and basically audit your time and then figure out how to replace those tasks to only focus on the high leverage tasks that you enjoy doing. So sounds simple in theory, but it's actually quite difficult to do. But that was quite transformational to me. And then I promise I'm not buttering up Jason, but the Private Lenders podcast is still my go-to. I listen to every episode. That's been pretty transformational for me, and the way that we run our business, learned a ton of things. So I'm an avid listener of that podcast.
Great. We're gonna have to hear this from Jason for the next 3 years. I remember that one time this one guest told me how great my podcast was, but dude, they're very transparent. Him and Chris do a very good job and put out really good content. And I would agree with that. And we had Dan Martell speak at our last mastermind virtually, and that was pretty cool. The guy that is probably one of the top books. Jason and I read that together side by side with what's the other one? Buy Back Your Time and
Who Not How.
Who Not How. If you read those two together, it's just like mind blowing.
Game changer.
How do we replace everything? You know?
Yes.
So,
Yep.
So with that being said, Bryce, this has been an absolutely awesome show. Where's the best place people can find you on the internet? They want to check out your content. I see your tag, but many people listen to this audio. So why don't you give a shout out where people can find you and learn more about what you guys are doing? Sure.
Yeah. Like I said, probably easiest and biggest is at Bryce Matheson. That's Bryce with a Y on Instagram. Again, like I said, come for the white monster content, or soon to be the energy drink content, and real estate and money related content, and occasional like nerdy dad jokes and memes. But yeah, I'm pretty active on Instagram, so I'm happy to help anybody. Feel free to reach out to me, shoot me a DM. I'm pretty active on there. And then if anybody wants to shoot me an email, it's just Bryce at joinlender, LENDR.com, joinlender.com. And yeah, happy to chat.
Right on. Well, we appreciate your time, guys. I know you got value out of this. If you did, please give Bryce a share. As you can see, he's just a real dude doing real things, and we will catch you guys on the next one.
Thanks for tuning in to the Real Estate Reserve podcast. Do us a favor and like, comment, and share our broadcast. It helps the algorithm and helps us spread the word too. Till next time, thank you for tuning in.